This show does not provide medical advice. If you're having a medical emergency, please call 911. Anything you hear here should be discussed with your primary health care provider. Hello, and welcome to Everyone Dies, the radio show produced by Passionate World Talk Radio, whose goal it is to educate, enlighten, and entertain. I'm Marianne Masso, and for the next 30 minutes, I am your host. Our radio show is about health-related concerns for people who've had serious illness, dying, death, and bereavement. Today, we're going to talk with Nicole. Welcome, Nicole.
Hello.
Hi. Now, Nicole had the coronavirus, and
Yes.
I know that there's still people out there who think that the coronavirus is a hoax, and, you read Facebook, all the things that people think. And so we thought it would be a good idea to talk with somebody who's actually had the virus. Now, Nicole's a young woman. She's got young children. She's getting married on Saturday. And Nicole told me that she got the virus from her parents. And I kind of laughed when she told me that, because usually, our kids sneeze all over us and give us every kind of nasty thing that we ever get. So I guess it's only fair, Nicole, that you got something from them. So tell me the story. What happened?
Well, we had been taking all of the precautions. I had been in Costa Rica the first week of March, and I came back into the country March 10th. So right as everything was starting to kind of shut down. And since, from that date, I'm a therapist and did my private practice virtual. We pulled the kids out. We did everything we could do to be safe. We stayed home. And then end of May, beginning of June, there was a little dip in the numbers. And we had thought our parents were really missing the kids. And it was kind of like, well, we've been safe. They've been safe, although they had to work. And we had them here for my husband's birthday dinner. And we all got sick the next week. And it was, kind of shocking and scary. My dad got sick first, and then my husband got sick, and then my mom, and then me. And it pretty much happened, within a few days of each other. We all got sick.
So Dad was the source of the virus then, I'm assuming?
We think it was him. Or my mom. They were both working, but my dad was symptomatic first.
And so what were your initial symptoms?
So my first symptom were my knees were hurting. And it was one of those things where I got out of bed in the morning and I was like, man, my knees hurt. Is this aging? Is this just what happens when you're almost 40, or is this just a little bit more? And by that time, Cale, my husband, he had been kind of not feeling great. But then that day when my knees started hurting, he had felt better. And that was one thing about this virus, is it comes kind of in waves. And so that was a Thursday. My knees started hurting. Friday, I was fine. Saturday, I was fine. I moved on Saturday. I had my friends help us move. By that point, we didn't know. It had been a week since exposure. We did not know that we had it. On Saturday, when I was moving, my mom had went and got tested. And Sunday, I woke up and I felt like, oh no, either I have a terrible sinus infection or I'm getting sick. And as soon as I had that realization, my mom had gotten her test results back and called and told us that she was positive.
Oh my gosh.
And so that first day, I think being in Oklahoma, we all have sinus issues and allergy issues.
Yeah,
and the way that I could explain it was the worst sinus infection pain without the congestion. And my voice just kind of changed and got very deep. And pretty much every hour after that, I deteriorated.
So what was happening?
it was so weird. Every day was it was like a different fiasco every day. It started with the face pain, and then it went to the body aches and just intense lethargy. And I was like, okay. And so we had to go get, we frantically went and got tested. And I will say, like, I had it way worse than my husband. And my mom, she's actually my stepmom, we call her name, she had it worse than my dad. It was different. I say worse because it's been longer. So the first day was very much like I just didn't feel well. And then the next day, so that would be Monday, Tuesday, it was that saying, like, my fever never really got above 101. And I think I only had a fever like the first 2 days. And it was Tuesday night, Wednesday morning when the headache set in. And it was debilitating. And I will say, when I was 21, I had encephalitis and I had to have a spinal tap. And this headache that I had during COVID was so reminiscent of having a spinal headache from a spinal tap, to the point where I called my friends that work in medical research. And I was like, is anyone doing research on spinal fluid and COVID? Because it was debilitating for about 4 days.
That
really
is way
bad.
Too long for that kind of headache.
It was really bad. And then it would come in waves, I feel like, and the headache would come in waves, and it was very, I'm trying to think of a way to describe it, almost like I could pinpoint the spots in my head where it was. It wasn't all over. And so that was, for me, the most debilitating part, was just the headache. Like, the pain was, I had to use my softest pillow, like any amount of pressure on my face just could trigger it. It was really rough for a couple of days. And just, every day I would wake up and we would get out of bed at, like, I don't know, noon, just like make sure the kids had sustained themselves and had breakfast and things were normal.
Gosh.
And I would feel okay for a couple of hours, and then I'd be down again. And then I would get up again around like 7, try and feed the kids and be down again. Hale, my partner, he had flu A in March, and he said for him, flu A was worse.
Oh, really?
For me, I had it way worse than he did. He was sick for about 7 days, and I was in bed for a solid 10 days and did not really feel normal. Well, honestly, I just got my sense of smell back in the last few weeks, and I was sick in June. We got
2 months of not being able to smell?
And I didn't even realize it until, like, I got in bed the other day and I could smell him, and I was like, oh my God, I haven't smelled you in so long. Like, I didn't even realize that it wasn't, because it was coming back so slowly. But my sense of smell went away on day 3. Smell and taste. It was just, it was just different. My parents, my mom is still having a hard time. Like, thank goodness none of us had to be hospitalized. But, my mom is still, like, she can't laugh without coughing. Her cough is still very, very prevalent. And I didn't even really get a cough. So one of the other things that I found super interesting is, like I said, I'm a therapist, so I always am kind of analyzing how we function. There is, I feel like, a cognitive impact, right, and an emotional. So we have the emotional part of, like, enhanced fear, because we've been hearing about COVID and we're so scared about COVID, and what does this mean? So that's already just kind of, like, there. Right. But I feel like there is an additional something in this virus, and I don't know if there's evidence to this other than just me talking to people that have had it, that it does something to the way you function emotionally, and definitely, like, a cognitive delay. There was many times I just my brain could not process what was happening. It's just slow. And my husband will say that he feels like his anxiety, just baseline anxiety, has increased like 45% since having COVID.
Really?
And he's not an anxious person. He wasn't even that anxious about getting it necessarily and having it, because he kind of expected that we would at some point. But it's just bizarre because it impacts everyone so differently in almost like every body system.
So the cognitive slowing, the cognitive delay you're talking about, are you talking about if somebody gives you a piece of information, you have to like chew on it a while before you get what they're talking about?
Yeah, and that, and also, so the example that I have is, and this was, I was on the road to recovery because I was in the living room, and we have a dog and a cat, and they cannot be in the same room. Okay, dogs and cats. And so we keep them separate. And one of the girls had accidentally let the cat out, and there was this big ruckus, and like tail had got up and got in the middle, and I just could not process what was happening. And by the time I got over, like one of the girls is bleeding from the cat scratching her, and the other girl's just standing there like mortified, like shaking because of the commotion. And it took me 5 minutes to understand what happened.
Wow.
Which
that
is something that
freaked you out.
It did. And I was just like, why is this happening? And I had called my parents to kind of just talk to them about it. And my mom just said that's the same thing. Like someone will have to repeat something to her 3 or 4 times before she's like, okay, I understand what you're saying. It's just like the neural pathways are sludgy or slower. It's just interesting.
Has there been that you've read, since you've got that scientific mind, is there anything that you've read to explain why that would happen?
You know, honestly, I haven't. I will be really honest that I had to pretty much right after I got sick, I got off Facebook and I quit researching because there's just too much. There's too much, you know, people believe it or they don't believe it. And it's just, you know, I know people whose parents have died from COVID, and I have friends that, you know, had to have emergency surgery as a result of COVID and all of these things. So I just had to eliminate myself from all of that and just kind of focus on my experience. I will say that my mom did a bunch of research and joined a lot of Facebook groups of people that have had it. And that seems to be one of the common symptoms that is happening, because she always gives me an update on like, I read this. Can you believe this? This is exactly what I'm experiencing, and why aren't people talking about this?
Wow. And is there any sense of how long that sludginess goes on?
For me, I feel like it took several weeks to kind of be able to recognize what was happening. And like, I'm a processor, so I'm pretty quick processing. So I would say like probably 10 days post for me, like once I really started feeling better and being able to kind of, you know, function normally, and going back to work was really difficult just in my brain working, and was challenging. It was just, you know, there's just weird things. I booked us a vacation while I had COVID and had no recollection of doing it.
Oh, you're kidding.
No.
Wow.
Like we had talked about going on vacation and what that looked like, but apparently I researched that the Atlanta Aquarium was doing like 50% capacity over 3 different reservation times and masks required, and I must have thought that was safe and like bought us tickets to do that. Did not remember. So I got a reminder email. Weird things,
I sometimes say to my husband, did I just think that, or did I actually say, you know, fill in the blank? And he'll say, yeah, you already said that, or no, you didn't say it, you must have just thought it. But I, you know, and I didn't even have COVID, I don't think. So that's pretty weird.
Yeah, it was just, I must have thought it was fine in that moment. And, you know, I'm really thankful that I had a friend who had a baby and was like, hey, you're you're suffering. I have medicine I can bring you, because I would have went to the hospital, and that was what I did not want to do. Like, I didn't want to take a bed away from someone who really needed it, and I didn't want to go, I was so scared about exposing myself to increased viral load and all of, I just didn't want to do that. I didn't want to be in a hospital by myself.
Right.
And so, I did everything I could to keep my fever down and manage my pain. There was that Wednesday night, that headache, I was really, really close to going to the emergency room.
Wow. Now, did you have any trouble breathing?
I really didn't, no. My parents did, and they went to the emergency room not because they were really, really struggling, but because they could tell that they were having a harder time maintaining their breath, just sitting, and that even talking, they were getting out of breath just communicating. And so they couldn't get a hold of any physicians to, like, in that moment, to call them back, telehealth, and they ended up going to the emergency room just because I think that freaked them out.
Right, that's scary.
Yeah, and they ended up, getting steroids and antibiotics, and, my dad's lungs looked worse than my mom's. He's recovered a lot faster than her. And then,
really,
the whole emotional side of it.
Yeah. So are they coping with it differently within your family?
Like emotionally, just how they live day to day? I think definitely. My mom's way more open and communicative in that way. And I think for my dad, I think it really freaked him out. Like, oh my God, am I going to die? Did I give it to my kids? Are my kids going to die? What is happening? And he just kind of shut down emotionally, I think, and just got really quiet. And I think he's been pretty quiet since then, pretty edgy even, I would say. Whereas my mom just wants to know everything. She wants to read all the things and, like, stay on top of what symptoms she is still struggling to get rid of.
Now,
we had a talk the other day.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. We had a
talk the other day, and I was saying to her, like, I need you to go to the doctor, and I need you to get a full blood panel and run your all of my friends are nurses and nurse practitioners. Like, I need you to go get all of this stuff. We need to check your clotting factor. Have they done another x-ray of your lungs? Because she still sounds really terrible.
And is she functionally impaired? I mean, is she able to walk and talk, or is she short of breath?
She's not as functionally impaired. No, like, she's still working. She works in a physical therapy office, and she's functioning. It's just, if we are telling jokes or laughing or whatever, she will start coughing. It's almost like that asthma cough that happens when someone laughs really hard.
Yeah.
But it's been every time I've talked to her since June.
God, that's so annoying just as a symptom.
Or just like it hurting, like coughing that much would be so painful for your muscles and skeletal systems.
Now, I was going to ask you, do you think your dad's reaction to it, and if I'm being too psyche, then you can, forgive me, but do you think him getting that kind of made him confront his own mortality? That has anything to do with his reaction?
100%. 100%.
Really?
He was very much like, we need to redo the wills. We need to be talking about, plans. Like, it really freaked him out in that way. And then there's the guilt. Like, I had guilt just because, oh my God, all of my friends were helping me move yesterday, and I wake up sick today.
Did any of them, I wanted to ask you, did any of them get sick?
They did not. And you know what else is interesting? It's so bizarre. We had both of our daughters here, and we're a blended family, so we have joint custody with their other parents. And because I got sick when I had my daughter, the girls just stayed here, and they never got sick, thank goodness. And we had them tested in July. One of them tested positive for antibodies, and the other one did not.
Wow.
And none of my friends got were positive, and they all got tested after I tested positive. I mean, we were moving and eating pizza and drinking beer, things you do when you're moving.
Right.
And we were not being as cautious. You know, they're my best friends. They're like my sisters. And we all had been doing the same precautions, so we felt fairly safe. And then kind of the same thing that happened with me. But that guilt was just like, oh, my gosh, if I get one of them sick and then they get someone else sick, like, I don't want to be responsible for killing someone.
Right.
I don't even want to be responsible for someone suffering with COVID and being sick, let alone like, oh, my God, like it could really mess you up.
Mm-hmm. Now, have you or your parents or your husband or your fiance noticed long-term kind of consequences from this disease?
I have not at this point. I don't think Kale has. My parents haven't told me anything with the exception of, you know, my mom's not recovered fully yet.
Yeah.
One of our really good friends, though, he's my age, so he's 38. He was diagnosed with COVID, I think, the beginning of July and was hospitalized. They put him on IV antibiotic and the plasma with the antibodies, and then he was released. And then he was back in the hospital, I think like a week ago, and his liver enzymes were completely out of control, and he was having intense abdominal pain. And they went in and they said, like, COVID, they had to take his gallbladder, and they had to put him on a bunch of stuff for his liver, and they were just like, COVID just wiped out these organs. Like, it's just, the doctor told him, and I quote, you already had, like, your not really functioning organ, gallbladder, because we don't really use them that much, you know? Like, COVID just took an already not functioning organ and just, like, annihilated it.
Wow. And so is he going to have chronic liver disease now?
I don't think we know yet.
Oh,
like,
okay.
It's just a matter of, like, can we get his numbers stable? He was discharged, you know, and he's just like a young guy like me. He's like, well, now I have to figure out what I can and can't eat. And it's just one of those things where you don't really think it's going to happen to you until it does. You know, I remember early in this, he was very much like, no, it's not that big of a deal. And, you know, he was still out there working, and he's a photographer. And then he was really, really sick, you know.
And the thing that's really kind of scary, in addition, I mean, there's a lot of things that are scary about it, but that it seems to be so variable of, you know, the 4 people in your family, you know, and it's like, it's not like everybody has the same symptoms or the same timeline or the same anything.
Right.
You know, it can be a blip on the screen or it can be death.
Right. And everything in between, which is just, even, you know, Kale, he did not ever really get a headache, whereas I was, and I have a pretty high pain tolerance. Like, I had natural childbirth. It's like I can tolerate a certain amount of pain. Yeah. But it was debilitating for me, and he didn't really have that at all.
Wow.
So it just, you know, I was having those nights that the headache was really bad, like thoughts that make no sense, and, you know, trying.
Do you
to
think you were delirious?
100%, yes.
Yeah.
And not from sleep deprivation, and not from a high fever, because I was sleeping, and my fever never got over like 101. And by the time the headache happened, I no longer really had a fever.
See, now those are symptoms that I haven't really heard talked about before.
Which part?
But that blinding kind of headache. So that's really, you know, another one to add to the list. I wouldn't have really thought about that.
And, you know, one of the things that when after I got diagnosed, someone from epidemiology called me for the state, and they kind of track you. And one of the things that she had said is that it seems to be, there's all this seems to be, there's not really, everyone's doing studies, a correlation with where you have had previous injury, like that the virus just kind of goes there a little extra, maybe. And so, like for my dad, his shoulder really ached. His shoulders and his knees really, really ached, and he has bad shoulders and knees. So I was like hypothesizing, well, maybe it's because I had encephalitis and, I have migraines, that this is attacking that part. But this was worse than any migraine I've ever had.
So it's sort of like a weak link in the chain, and it attacked your vulnerable spots.
Maybe, yeah. And then she told me that the evidence is looking like you have, and this again was in the beginning of July probably when I talked to her, the epidemiologist, that it's looking like you have brief immunity. So like 3 to 4 months.
What, and how do they determine that?
I have no idea. She said that there are increasing cases of people getting it more than once.
Oh, gosh.
And so, that's how she said they're kind of determining that it's a shorter term immunity, kind of like the flu. You usually only get one type of flu once a year.
Right.
And, we ended up going on
lasts longer than that.
Right. Yeah, that's just kind of what she told me, 3 to 4 months. We ended up going on the vacation that I booked in my COVID haze. And it was kind of one of these things, well, we can push it and then maybe not have immunity, or go with like science says that we have immunity right now. And, we took a road trip, and our daughters, I made them little like crossbody purses, and they had their masks in there, and they had hand sanitizer hanging on the side, and I even went and bought them a bunch of fake glasses that they could wear so they wouldn't touch their eyes. But it was kind of like, I don't know when we're going to get another vacation, and if we're safe, it's going to be right now.
Yeah, that's true, right? Yeah.
We did all these things. We postponed our wedding. We were originally supposed to have our big ceremony on May 2nd, and we canceled that. We ended up having a tiny little ceremony. But it was just one of these things where, like, well, if we're going to do it, how do we do it, and how do we do everything safely now in this new time that we're in?
And there's so many variables to think about that sometimes you can't even think of them all.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you have these conversations, like our daughters saw us be so sick and, been so worried about my parents. And now when we go out and they see someone not wearing a mask, they're like, why are they not wearing a mask? I'm like, I don't know. People get to make their own choices.
Even if they're bad choices, they get to make their own choices, right?
My daughter the other day was like, well, should I go tell them that, like, you were sick? And I was like, no, you don't need to tell people. It's just it's a really weird thing. Like, I only know a few people really close to me that have gotten it, and all of them, even the younger ones, were like, this is way worse than I thought it was going to be. I think Kale, my husband, is the only one who was like, the flu was worse for me, but him watching me, I think, freaked him out because it knocked me out. Like, I think one of the days my dad we would just FaceTime and kind of check in, because you don't ever really know is this the day, like, someone's going to end up in the hospital, because every day was so different. And my dad saw me on FaceTime, and I must have looked awful. He said, oh, my God, you look like shit. And he's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to say that. I'm so sorry that you're sick. But I think him looking at me and seeing how I looked and sounded, like, he was really upset and saddened that, they exposed us inadvertently.
Mm-hmm. Well, Nicole, that is an incredible story, and I'm so glad that you shared it with me and with our listeners, and I wish you the happy wedding on Saturday.
Thank you.
That's exciting. And I want to thank our listeners for spending time with us during this show, Everyone Dies. You can read our blogs and listen to our other podcasts at everyonedies.org. That's EVERY, the number 1, dies.org. Thank you to our producer, Jeanne White, and our CEO, Lillian Caldwell. We produce a new show every Wednesday to answer questions related to life-threatening illness, dying, and death. Remember, you can listen to Passionate World Talk Radio on Spreaker and our shows wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have a topic you'd like to discuss on our show, please email Marianne at everyonedies.org. It's MARIANNE at everyonedies.org. EVERY, the number 1, dies.org. I hope that you live your best life every day. And remember, every day is a gift. Thank you for listening.